my moment of initial enlightenment was probably when I was around 10 years of age. I was a preacher's kid. Oh, everybody's I was a preacher's kid. And as a human being, as a little black boy from the South, that came with all of this curiosity. You know, children are born with different ways, different stuff. Not every child is the same. I was born with a very inquisitive mind. My grandmother was a minister, and being a woman from the South, she fought a lot of battles uphill, especially in the church. You see. And my grandmother taught me, she used me to help her standing in the church. And let me tell you how she did that. She's a very clever woman. The menfolk, as they used to call them when I was a little boy, would not let her preach, and she wanted to preach. Any of you know anything about that?
Oh, yes.
They would not let her preach. And so, being as my grandfather used to call a clever bird, she decided that whenever they did give her an opportunity to preach, she would spice things up a bit. So she taught me at 6 years of age how to speak, how to enunciate and pronunciate, how to use big words and fully understand what they mean. And that went on for a number of years. And what she would do is I would introduce her before she got ready to speak. And you know how church folk are. Oh, you should have heard this little boy this morning. This is the South, word of mouth. You know. And so every time she got ready to preach, the numbers of the edifices that she was preaching at, whether it was our church or visiting at another church, the numbers grew. They grew phenomenally, as did my experience. Not only in knowing how to speak and how to extemporaneously allow the truth of my mind to flow, but I also learned that my grandmother was living a double life. My grandmother was just like many of us. She was holy by day and just an old Southern black woman by night. You know, she used language in the home. she threw things at my grandfather when she got angry. You know, just regular old people stuff. You know. And she knew how to change voices when the phone rang. You know. Code switching. And for me, that was difficult. It was difficult to understand what was going on. I was a different child. I was very honest about my approach in life, I guess you could say. I believed in what she did. I believed in what she said. But I was getting two lessons at the same time. I too tried to be holy. And then could not understand the other side. So I think around 10 years of age for me, something broke in my mind. And I wanted to know more than my grandmother, because I felt that for 4 years I had been taught these things, you know, how to love, how to be kind, how good God is, those sorts of things. And my mind broke because I believed in them so deeply. But yet her living was a detour sign, you know, towards misunderstanding and confusion. You know, some sense of trauma was occurring. And so I began this quest to deeply understand what Jesus was saying myself. I really did. By the time I reached 13 years of age, I had come to know through study. Imagine that, a 13-year-old studying theology. How absurd, right? They have Xbox now. PS5. 5 and things of that sort. And I wanted to know more because I wanted to help my grandmother to stay on the one side. The other side was too confusing. Lesson right there. I wonder what our children truly think of us. Hang on to that one. I was confused. And I sought my own remedy, to find out. I began reading books that were well beyond me. The things I didn't understand. There was a Webster somewhere. There was a thesaurus somewhere. Back in the day, ever so often you get a new set of Britannicas. You all remember that? Encyclopedia Britannica? Yes. And I read and I studied and I learned things and I understood what they meant. And I began applying these things to my life. And so, to your question, when was my awakening, I guess? My initial awakening was more academic and intellectual than anything else. I understood there was a disconnect between how many of us were living as believers and what we were actually supposed to be doing as Christians, supposed to be doing. We're taught these things to be kind and loving, and for me, that felt better. Does it not feel better? You see? But I also understood the conflict of my grandmother's living. I often say that all of us are victims of the post-traumatic stress disorder of our parents. You see? And I did not want to be that way. So my initial awakening was around, between 10 and 13. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Day by day and by night.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Bodhi Christo. The moniker literally means Enlightened Christ. Enlightened Christ. Bodhi means enlightened. From the Hindu tradition. Christo. I'm sure you all have studied Christology. You see, referencing Christ, his living, the study of Christ. So Bodhi Christo means enlightened Christ. What does that mean? Who is that? Who is that person? When we read of Jesus in the scriptures, we don't often read about an enlightened Christ. We read of the Son of God or the Son of Man. What this enlightened being, what is that? Well, let me ask you a question. With all of the churches that we have in America, with every denomination, rank and filed, are we enlightened? Is Christ really fulfilling the need? We go to seminary, we get our doctorates, and then we find ourselves before people teaching, preaching. And they're getting better because of it, right? Wrong.
Yeah.
It was okay for you to say no. This is the truth. We'll be dealing with some truth tonight. So enlightened Christ means that there's an element of Christ that's much more enlightened, much more awakened to the human condition than we are. Could it be that we are missing the most major part about Christ's ministry? Could it be? Why, yes. I would venture to tell you that the most important part of Christ's ministry is the human being. He did not come to minister to the trees. He came to minister to human beings and then taught human beings how to minister to other human beings. And we are better because of it, are we not? No. It's all right. It's all right. You know? Someone once asked me, do I believe that God exists? Why, yes, I do, certainly. We are wonderful people. Are we not? We do wonderful things. We edify everything that we come in contact with, do we not? As human beings, these wonderful human beings. God must exist, right? Then why are we this way? It is not a matter of God existing or Jesus existing. It's not a matter of that. It is what part of you as a human being are you actually playing in that? What part of the message are you actually living fully? We talked this morning about BodhiChristo. I think a couple of students were in that class. Oh, this is great for the overflow. We talked about BodhiChristo. BodhiChristo is the Buddhist concept of loving kindness. Loving kindness. Not southern hospitality, but loving kindness. True loving kindness. Great compassion and empathy for all human beings. Each and every person that we come into contact with, there's a sense of equanimity that exists without us even having to observe it. This is what BodhiChristo implies. The most difficult part of actually practicing BodhiChristo is knowing yourself. We do a lot of things. We learn a lot of methods in order to engage human beings. And the methods are, sometimes very good methods. Church is a good method. But unless the leaders know themselves fully, I mean fully, there's no shame to that person, regardless of what they've done. There's no discrimination within that person's mind. There is full understanding. There is neither great nor small. You see, there's neither first nor last. There's no exaggeration of ego. Unless this exists, then all you have is a method. Could this possibly be why we are the way that we are today? It's a good question. So BodhiChristo implies that the crux of connecting to other human beings is to connect to yourself. Do you know how many ministers I've met over the course of my life that actually engage ministry and go into ministry and go to school to learn how to articulate something so wonderful? Never once, many of them, do they ever touch their own drums. They want so desperately to be free and to free other people, make them joyous and wonderful, yet they don't know that themselves. So, could this be the reason that we are today? So, going back to Bodhi Christo, what is Bodhi Christo? It means enlightened Christ. Was Christ enlightened? Yes. It also implies that the efforts, the work, the diligence that we owe the gospel, we owe our own God, or whatever God, the best that we have to offer. What would happen if we were to become enlightened and then go and preach the gospel? Imagine that. A Buddha at First Baptist Church. Imagine a Buddha at, what was the one we went to? Ebenezer. A Buddha. It would no longer be simply the home of gospel music. It would become the home of happy souls, you see. So enlightenment itself begins with knowing yourself, your limitations. How many of you have ever gone to your limit and met it? How many of you have ever tried something so outrageous just to see where you land? So BodhiChristo is that. It is the enlightened Christ. Christ was enlightened, and certainly Christ must have been enlightened, much more human than we. Imagine the psychological things that the Son of God must have faced. Seen deceased people, sick people, sad people, crippled people. Imagine that. So much so to the point that he pushed through his own humanity. He recognized his own humanity and did what he had to do in order to make those people whole. Have you gone to the full length of your human cable tow? Do you know your own mind, or are you just an exaggeration of history? Why, even Christ didn't want that. He did not want to be an exaggeration of his Father. What did he say? I know what the law says, but I say otherwise. There's a point in being human that you dismiss what you've been told. And you go and you find out in your own flesh, your own fingerprints. How many of you look at your own fingerprints? You know them. You know something about what they look like, what they feel like, which ones are a bit more curvy than the others. Really, how many of you know this? Yet many of us dare to preach and tell other people about themselves.
That's not preaching.
No. It's overlooking your fingerprints.
That's a good metaphor.
So enlightenment, first of all, has to be bigger than what we're doing. The gospel has been around now for almost 3,000 years. You see. And this is where we are. If God is so wise and so powerful, and he sends a man, a human being, in our midst, a human being, the perfect human being, Jiddu Krishnamurti was taken by the Theosophical Society, and they shaped him, they molded him into what they would consider the perfect human being, full of wisdom, full of insight, full of a understanding of his own fingerprints and how that relates to other people. When you understand yourself, this is where your enlightenment is born. Yes.
Isn't that what, isn't that the character of the salvation that Jesus offered was enlightenment?
Sure.
It wasn't like some transactional deed.
No.
It was enlightenment that he was offering.
Yes,
right?
absolutely. It was not a get out of jail free card.
Mm-hmm.
And I would venture to tell you that many of us are the way that we are simply because of fear. And Christ offered fearlessness through enlightenment.
Yes.
You ever wonder where Jesus was between the ages of 14 and 29?
Mm-hmm.
In the Himalayas, the lineage from which and through which I was ordained and came to this understanding, there is a history of one called Isa. Jerusalem-born traveler who came, he studied. Would not God want his own human son, like an Ivy League school, to go to the best places to find out how the human being works? Jews were resistant. And they wanted a warrior. They wanted somebody to fight and to overthrow the government. They wanted the Romans to be under their feet. And that is a pattern of human history without enlightenment. Make your enemy your footstool. Whereas Christ, an enlightened being, insisted that you should make your enemy your friend.
Yeah.
How do you do that? In order to have friends, you must first demonstrate friendliness. Are not the longest lasting relationships the ones that are rooted in truth and honesty? And you can be yourself, whether you're broken or you're just sitting on the top of the world like Elon Musk and Twitter right now. You see? So first, before we go too far, I would venture to say that if we are to begin this journey of enlightenment and begin understanding enlightenment, there's a point that we must slow down and learn ourselves, learn of ourselves, learn to be with ourselves. You, Ram Dass, as we were on our way over here, came to mind. Ram Dass said, the simplicity of life is this. We're all just simply walking each other home. Home, you're living, you will die. You are no more than time, and that's not your responsibility, but you are energy. What is the energy of a book? The full energy of that book is either, if you're the author, they're your words, or they're the words of someone else. The full brunt of that. What if you wrote your own book? And used your own skin and blood as the pages? Fully touch them. You know. Then you wake up. And you realize that all of us are the same. We're all very simple, yet we have the ability to be enlightened. We can be just like Christ. The ability to forgive. the ability to really be empathetic. This is enlightenment, right? You mean to tell me you don't struggle now with anger?
The ability to be angry.
The ability to be angry and understand that that is merely a symptom.
Mm-hmm.
Look how much we put into the symptoms, as if the symptoms are the thing. We get angry and want to separate from each other. That's not the problem. The anger is the symptom. What is it that you misunderstood or understood based on your experience that caused you to be angry? Does this make sense to you?
Yeah.
So the depth of serving Christ goes much deeper than what we have done in this country and throughout the world. We can strap a rocket to a man's ass and send him hurtling through space. And he can come back with all kinds of Polaroids and show us how beautiful the universe is, yet we don't know how to deal with our own troubles. And then we project those onto other people. And then we justify it. And then we destroy the relationship. And then we dismiss it as if it wasn't even important, because we'll find somebody who will trauma bond with us. And then we will rinse and repeat, dry our lives and go out and to do it again. Imagine the psychological things that Christ had to overcome. He had to see. He had to deal with in order to be the Son of Man. In order to be fully human, the perfect human. Imagine such. Imagine what you must do. Many of us will graduate. I graduated several times now. And I halfway don't even know where my degrees are. Simply because the education of understanding that I am a little black Southern boy who still has a problem dealing with racism is much more of an enlightened thing. And to work through that, with that, understand where I, as an individual, am fully responsible for the symptom. You understand this?
Yeah.
So, Bodhi Christo is taking Christ seriously. This is what they call, I was interviewed by Harper's Magazine, and this is what they called in that writing, a devastating logic. Imagine Christ, his parables, how difficult they must have been for people to hear. And they were only difficult because of two factors. One, it was not their conditioning. Two, he required of them to do something themselves. You understand this? There are three types of knowledge. We touched on these this morning. The first knowledge, and I should add that Bodhi Christo theology, Bodhi Christo philosophy, Bodhi Christo practitioners engage in all three of these forms of knowledge. The first knowledge is what you would call explicit knowledge. It's those damn books they make you pay for when you sign up for the course. They're going to give you the information, and then they're going to test you on it, and then whether you do it right or do it wrong, that's going to be your grade. That is the information that they give you. It's your name, it's your religion at birth, it's your parents telling you this is good, this is bad. This is right, this is wrong. Hang out with them, don't hang out with them. It's the things that are told to you. And we somehow do what? We follow. Because that is the condition. That is the pattern. We see everybody else doing it. He listened to his mama. She listened to her mama. He did the job like they told him to do it. You understand? We must be, right and do the same thing. Explicit knowledge. The second knowledge is what you would call codified knowledge. Codified. The root word. Anybody can tell me the root word? Code.
Code.
Forgive my laughter, it's enlightened. Someone once said to me, how dare you insult us and then laugh at us? No, I'm not insulting you. This is what you call empathetic joy. Codified knowledge, it's the code, it's the stop sign, it's the broken lines where you can pass. It's the solid line you can't pass. It's the parking spaces that are lined up this way and not that way. You know exactly what to do because society has structured it so, and you have practiced it so long and so well. Codified knowledge. And then there's the third knowledge. Anybody know what that is? This is key in being fully engaged in interfaith work. You must do this third knowledge. The third knowledge is called tacit knowledge. T-A-C-I-T. It looks like this. This is a glass of water. Somebody would hand me that and say that's a glass of water. I can accept it at face value, or I can touch it and taste it and see it for myself. Yep, they were right.
No, that's gin.
Yeah. You understand this? It's touching it for yourself. It's not going on what someone says. That is where human beings are often lost. Right there. You give up your freedom. You give up your place of enlightenment. You were in line when you were born to be enlightened. And some would whisper to you from the front of the line, because they did not understand tacit knowledge, they would look back and say to you, "It's all you need. Salvation is all you need. Making a statement of faith is all you need. Going to church is all you need. Joining this church is all you need. Going to seminary is all you need. It'll correct you right. It'll make you right. You are seminarians. You are faculty. You have no problems, right? Those things that they prescribed to you made your life a whole lot better. Did they not? No.
No.
Sounds like you had to think about that.
I never know what's coming.
We're going to get in unison before this is over.
No.
But tacit knowledge is touching it, and you have to touch your life from the place that you are. That is a certain place in your life where you have to automatically put up blinders and say, all right, I've been given, this opportunity to experience it myself, and so I will block out the suggestion to settle on being a good human being as described by other people. Does this make sense to you? Tacit knowledge. Touch it for yourself. Many of us are no more than walking history lessons. Someone else's history. This country is a geographic history lesson of a terrible time. When that big ship parallel parked in Virginia, are we not still battling those things? So BodhiChristo, it is not easy. It is not easy. It requires of you to look yourself in the face and say, you liar. Or you sad person. Or you wrong person. Or you sympathetic person only. We know how to have sympathy, but it's not empathy. Like that's touching. You see the difference there? So BodhiChristo requires of you to do, in essence, as Jesus demonstrated. Having those little nasty crackers on the first Sunday and a little bit of juice. This has made us better, right?
No.
There we go. And this is not my logic, and there's no justification for it, no matter how theologically or philosophically astute we may be. You take those things to the ghetto, all of your high-minded gleanings, and ask if this is working for them. Does this make sense to you? BodhiChristo is about taking Christ and his actions seriously. Seriously. I was a Christian minister for 25 years.
No.
Yes. I entered into seminary and then monastery apprenticeship at the same time, and so I was fortunate. I understood me while trying to do Jesus. I understood me while trying to do Jesus. Many of us try to do Jesus. You know, we try to do ecumenism without understanding the other people. You know, programs don't necessarily make progress. Yeah. Understand? So, Bodhi Christo is that. It is what Christ was. We always have to consider, if we're going to proclaim that God was great, how great? So great that, you know, the service of God, it brings about sweat to your brow all the time. And not because they're not paying you enough money for preaching, but because you're constantly looking deeper into your own self, removing criticisms of yourself by understanding what you're critical of. I think the best people who do ministry are those that are broken, acknowledge that they're broken, and stay away from people until they fix themselves. There's a Zen mantra that we're taught when you first enter into the monastery. Slow down and you'll get there faster. Slow down and you'll get there faster. You see? And this is what we must do. It's interesting that Christianity is always trying to keep up, you know, following behind, you know, what's going on and trying to fix it. You see? Trying to fix it. Society has gotten like this. We need to figure out a way to fix it. If you do not understand why society is that way, from a very tacit perspective, go and lick the pavement, not just drive by and look at it. Imagine what your papers would be.
We just smell the sidewalk.
You can smell it, but get close enough. Make an ant reach up to your nostril. You know? Imagine what your papers will be. Imagine what your teaching will be. Imagine what people who are broken, who are covering up their lives just like you, would open up to. You understand this? And it is difficult work. I will be the first one to tell you that. I was on silent retreat about this journey for 10 years. You can't talk. Speak only if you can improve upon silence. It's worth giving a try. We've said everything we can possibly say using scripture and theological definition and philosophy, and we are better as a result of it, are we not?
No.
So the work is to slow down. Really come into contact with you. Not necessarily trying to fix it. You've got to see it first. One of the most basic and primordial instincts, emotions of human beings is fear. Not understanding what those big fireballs are falling through the galaxy and now hitting the earth. You know, rain and all of these other things that are happening around us. Imagine what the first people might have imagined. It's got to be something else going on up there. A sense of fear. And that has existed with us for a very long time. We serve God through a sense of fear. We call it reverence. But I know people who would not even dare go to fix a relationship with someone that they've been angry with, who may have been wrong because of fear of losing their place in the line of heaven. You understand this? Mm-hmm. So BodhiChristo is that. It's taking Christ quite seriously. Any other questions?
I have a question. So, I really appreciate the loving kindness and starting with yourself.
Yes.
Through my journey, one thing I challenge with a lot is letting go of what's not mine to carry.
Yes, that's right.
So how would you approach that discernment?
Yeah, well, first of all, you have to understand whatever dynamics you are experiencing, others are experiencing as well. And so don't make it fantastic. Death has been on this planet since the first human beings. Why is it extraordinary? Even your brain, psychologically, cerebrally, having a difficult time processing that. Both explicit and codified knowledge have been so welded into your spines as human beings that it's difficult, to even accept what is so basic of us. So you overcome those things by just, everybody's going through that.
Making it fantastic.
Yeah. Don't make it fantastic. I've got badass kids, and there's a reference in Scripture where one brother killed the other brother for the goodies of the Father. It's been going on a long time. There's nothing extraordinary about that. And that is what we call in Buddhism basic sanity. It is the doctrine of basic sanity. You see, you fall down, you have to do what? Get back up. Notice I didn't say hurt yourself or anything initially, but you have to get up. These are concomitant effects of being human. So that's, don't make it extraordinary. Empathetic joy is something that, it's just, empathetic joy is a coincidence of understanding. You see, love is a coincidence of fully embracing whom you are. When you fully embrace who you are, the bad, the brokenness, the aspiration, when you embrace you can fully understand someone else. It's just that simple. When you take something so simple and you make it extravagant, is that intelligence? You understand? No. It's not intelligent for us to sour our souls for the remainder of our lives because someone has passed from us. Will it hurt? Yes, everybody hurts. But should this stunt your growth as a human being? No, that's happened to a lot of other people. It seems to be how we're wired. To understand that and accept that is to leave room for furtherance of understanding. As difficult as it may be, and it is only difficult because both explicit and codified knowledge have, like I said, been welded into your spine. What do we often challenge? One of the most fascinating looks I get when I go to colleges and universities, and I've been all over, is when people do this, and I will say something, and they say, like you back there, come down. The answer is wear your shoes out. You understand? Did that help?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd also say that that not taking ourselves so seriously, if we don't do that, then we can continue to have joy in the joy of others. That's another Buddhist precept,
yes.
Is to joy in the joy of others. And if you can, if you can do that, you increase bodhicitta, but you also, you don't ignore where you are. You observe where you are. I'm in disappointment. I'm in pain. I'm in sadness. But you see, if you can still joy in the joy of others, if you can still find beauty, if you can still recognize the value of of everything that's going on around you, you keep yourself in a state of equanimity.
Yeah, absolutely. And equanimity is the, we talked about this morning. Equanimity is the coincidence of knowing yourself. If racists understood that they are no different than the people they object, if molesters understood that they are no different than the people they hurt, if traffickers of human beings understood, and I'm not talking about explicit or codified knowledge, then it would be less likely to harm those people. Upeksha, we talked about it this morning. Upeksha means equanimity. And equanimity is the effect of the cause. If the cause is understanding yourself, the effect will be less discrimination of other human beings and the world and the ocean and the soil. You understand this? It is a coincidence, but you must do something first. You see, you must love yourself.
Let me,
Yes.
if I can, explore an idea with you.
All right.
Touch your knowledge from the place where you are.
Yes. Touch your knowledge from the place that you are. This is true.
Oh, it's that you are and where you are.
Where you are.
Okay. So,
And I venture to say where you are simply because is it not a journey?
yeah, and so I think where I want to enter this conversation is this idea of double religious belonging, which, is part of my attraction for being here tonight.
Yeah.
And I will also say, in the interest of disclosure, I'm from the South.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I can relate to the descriptions you provided regarding church and grandparents and so forth, and the contradictions. And I think that that's the part of the conversation that's most disturbing. It's the contradictions. It's where we are, and my quest is to return to the ways of our ancestors. And in so doing, reclaim, rebuild, and manifest, I guess I could say. So what am I really talking about? I'm talking about the fact that this is what I'm calling epistemological terrorism. The idea that one group of people, based on an ideology of supremacy, viewed other people, specifically indigenous people, as ignorant, as having not made any significant contributions to human intellectual history. And on the basis of that, create systems of knowledge, institutions of higher learning, and use that as a standard to which others were expected to conform. And for me, I ain't buying it. So that's where my struggle is presently. That's where I am currently. So the whole idea that the agricultural systems that were created in different parts of Africa, the idea that there were that was astronomy, you know, and there were systems for, you know, understanding the celestial bodies, mathematics, grounded in Africa. You understand?
I do.
And so consequently, the way we have been alienated from the ways of our ancestors and what our ancestors knew. So much so, I was reading just the other day where this person had knowledge about healing and different other things related to, you know, spiritual matters, and gave all that up to embrace Christ. Because somebody represented Christ as superior to what they had.
Right.
So, contradiction. So I'm saying, you know, I don't know at this moment how to reconcile African spirituality with Christianity. Because
Well, first, you have to recognize Christianity is a hybrid religion, and is a huge amount of it is Christianity. Is Christian. A huge amount of Christianity is African. A huge amount of Christian tradition is African. Intellectual tradition is African. Cyprian of Carthage, Tertullian of Alexandria, what's the other guy's name? Origin of Alexandria. These are African peoples. St. Augustine of Hippo Regius was an African man, and you can say whatever you want about his citizenry, but you can't take away from him his Africanness. His Africanness makes the way we interpret him and all of them suspect, because it's framed in individualism. It's not framed in African actual way of thinking in the world. So Christianity is not foreign to Africa.
Indeed.
It's not an enemy of Africa. It's not, you know, it's not the only African. It's not the only. It's not only to be viewed through the lenses of Western development of Christianity. That was a hijacking of the Christian trajectory by Constantine. That was a hijacking, and that was a whole system of something that's not Christian that went forward in the world. And that's what you have to retrieve is the Christian from the Bible. You have to retrieve is the Christian from the African origins of the story itself. The story itself is shaped in African stories, with African stories. So I don't agree that you need to juxtapose them to each other. African spirituality and Christian spirituality. You don't have to juxtapose them. What you have to find out is how they relate. And they interrelate in profound
as
ways.
an outcome, as a result, I agree with you, but in our current reality,
But
they are
you can call
juxtaposed.
that stuff Christian if you want to, but I don't call it Christian.
Okay, I get you.
There's
I got you.
nothing Christian about Western Christianity.
And
I'm sorry.
that's what I get to deal with, the stuff that is not Christian,
Yeah.
representing itself.
It's representing
Christian.
itself as Christian. It is not Christian.
So I'm saying that is what is before me, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I get to pay attention to.
Yeah.
You know, and just one more quick point on this, you know, because I'm reading, you know, Rattray and Wade Noble side by side. And so struggling to understand, you know, again, Western psychology and whatever this is that, who'll say, I don't know if it can be if it's even comparable, but, you know, I'm going to use your word, juxtapose to Western psychology, because the whole word about, you know, of course, you know, we, according to Abbot, you know, it came out of Kemet, you know, whatever the Greeks represented as suke, you know, was actually a Kemetic term. So I get that point, but the fact of the matter is that images of soul, personhood, and spirit, and unconsciousness is what informs that system. And in this Western system of psychology, those terms are almost
Well, they're
removed.
really suspect, yeah. Because they're transrational. They're not, subject to the laws of logic and that sort of thing. But we all know that the world is based on more than logic.
Sure.
That the world is based on magic more than logic. We know that. But we don't accept that because we're trying to go for what's the first kind of knowledge?
Explicit.
The explicit knowledge. We're
Right.
trying to go for the explicit knowledge we learn in the textbooks.
That's right.
And the codified knowledge that keeps us doctrinally correct, but is not what we actually experience. It's not the experiential knowledge of you know, my mother was, it almost went right over my head when I was reading in the handbook for the Christian and non-Christian of the Church of God by Faith, which my mother's family started in 1914. But my grandfather's cousin had a disease called catarrh. It's kind of a respiratory disease. And he said that his mother came to him one day and said, this is my great-great-aunt Delia, who I look just like. She came to him one day and said, do you want to be healed of your disease? And he said he thought that she meant she was going to go mix medicines for him. But instead she laid hands on him and healed him, and that's how he received the baptism of the Holy Ghost. I almost missed the reference to mixing medicines. And then I remember my own mother used to send us out into the woods to pick certain barks from the trees and certain roots from the ground. And that was our medicine when we were growing up. So I have this whole heritage of healing that almost completely escaped me until I was well grown and looked into the handbook for the Christian and non-Christian. So retrieving is, I think, an important aspect of what we have to do. We have to retrieve those traditions if we can, to the extent we can. But at the same time, I think we have to recognize the way that the world is calling on us to do different things too, and do things differently than they did too. So, you know, to embrace not only Eastern methods of healing, but Western methods too, because they together they can do something. You know, but don't put your faith wholly in any of it, but put your faith in the God within, the self and the self's capacity to desire healing. I mean, that's half of it, is to desire being healed. And then the other half of it is to come to where you can be healed, to the places where you can be healed.
There's a term, I just ran across it today, and it's an indigenous term, And basically it translates, or doesn't really translate, but it's understood to be looking through two eyes. So the idea that you look at the world through indigenous eyes, right, but also look at the world through Western eyes, because together the two can work together.
And Diane Stewart wrote a book called Three Eyes for the Journey.
That's right.
And I would venture to say that the most important aspect of your eyeballs is to look through life with your own eyes. Experience life with your own eyes. The common parallel between Christianity and Buddhism is this. Jesus, God, Moses, Isaiah, everybody who's ever represented in Scripture did not come to minister to monkeys. They spoke to human beings. And until we understand what it means to be human, we'll never understand, the parallel. We won't. We will always make definitions. And let me tell you something. My PhD is in systematic theology. If you define it, you'll have to defend it. And we're doing good with defending our stances, aren't we? No.
No.
Yeah.
You understand? No. There is a parallel in all religions. We're all eating off the same loaf of bread because we're human beings. Whenever that becomes less than our theories and theologies and pursuits of intellectual challenge or whatever prowess we pursue to justify our positions, we set ourselves apart from every other human being. And it is difficult, especially when you're an academician. The pursuit is cerebral excellence. But if you do not have excellence in your skin, and those that do not have academic excellence don't recognize your skin, then it does not matter how intelligent you are, you will miss the point of living, the point of Christ, the point of enlightenment, the point of Buddha. If you define anything, you'll automatically, have to defend it. It's a cerebral process. It's very elementary. You'll never be able to see where Jesus was going or how Scripture itself, when it was used to justify the treatment of African slaves, it was used as the tool, and out of fear, a human factor, Africans adopted it in order to save their hides. And it now has become a major part of whom we are. Yet we still, we're doing good with this. You understand? You understand? So there's always the parallel. There's always the parallel, because the parallel is human. It's human. Right. What is the subject matter of what we're doing here today? Is it theology? Is it philosophy?
Oh, there he is.
No. Here I am. Blessings to you. It's all right. Yeah. The main point is your humanity. Do you know how many angry human beings are walking the planet?
We saw about 15 of them in
Oh,
cars
right.
today.
Absolutely. And do you know why they're angry? Because they have all, in many cases, whether it be internal or they have an external definition, they have defined the circumstances. They have defined another's circumstances. They have defined the condition, and they have accepted that to be so. And so when you are angry, when you are focused on the definition, let me tell you something about life. It will not always agree with you. But if you understand life, and you understand the living of other human beings, and you understand even more intricately than that, that you are no different than Elon Musk.
A little bit poorer.
Little bit poorer. But you are no different. You are no different. And if you define that difference in terms of revenue, why, you are cutting yourself short. You are limiting God's reach. You know. And what would we be reclaiming? What would we be rebuilding? In an age that has bypassed, you know, such information, we want to gain so that we can improve our lives, but to reclaim, there's so many more. You think that my grandmother will ever reclaim freedom? I'm still fighting for it. You know, I just said earlier that all of us are walking history lessons. What are we trying to reclaim? We do a bang-up job of representing history. You see? The new frontier of spirituality that will serve us best is the frontier where we understand more about flesh and blood, where we understand more deeply about how that flesh and blood is the same makeup of every human being. You see, to understand this deeply, imagine this. I tell all of my students, I think Joanne was one of those 12 years ago. You know, I tell all of my students, if you want to be a student of mine, and currently I have over 130,000 across the globe, we're only 5 years old, and so we're growing. Yeah. I tell all of my students this one thing. You want to be a student of mine? For 24 hours, you've got the power. Practice not liking or disliking anything. And if you cannot basically do this, then you've already established an obstacle to your progression. Because you have a mind that's engineered and geared towards definition, which will always keep your living like this. Because life will not agree with you. Does this make sense to you?
Yes.
You don't want to reclaim. You want to know and build afresh. We build an African diaspora now. We build a monument of Africana now. How is this going to help every other human being on the planet that may not be African, that may not understand those things? We stand a better chance of understanding what misery is, of what sadness is.
But isn't that a choice at the end of the day? Isn't that a choice?
It is a choice.
It's a choice.
It's
right?
a choice.
And I can tell you that, you know, based on, you know, my limited experience of living in Africa, Ghana specifically, right? The spirit of the people. When they say Akwaba, yeah, that's for anybody.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I get that.
Right.
And I'm still saying that there is a particularity about our experience.
Right.
And so the Ashantis, they don't do it like the Airways.
Right.
The Airways, they don't do it like the Yoruba.
Right.
Even though they're connected.
Right. The particulars.
So I'm saying that it may be nomenclature, but when I say reclaim,
yeah,
I understand exactly what I'm saying.
Right.
And I also understand the need
right.
for doing what I am proposing to
Right.
be done.
Right. I understand this. There's a specific opposed to the particularity. The specific of your pursuit should be to understand yourself. In understanding yourself, you will understand other human beings. You see, you must deeply invest in you. When you understand you, you understand all things.
Which has been a life journey.
It will be so in a very short time.
No, it has been.
Yeah.
No, literally, it has been. You know, participating in this community, participating in this community, deriving from this community something, all for what reason?
Right.
Self-development, self-enlightenment. You understand? So I agree with you,
Yeah.
you know, that there is, you know, this idea that we're all human. I get that.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
Yeah.
I cannot ignore,
Right.
you know, the wisdom of,
Absolutely. Have you ever retreated?
yes, I've sweated, I've done all of this.
Yeah. How many of you have ever gone on an individual retreat, a silent retreat?
Yes, I've done that.
A silent retreat.
Yes,
And done so for an extended period of time.
yes.
And what was the incidental, you know, outcome?
For me, getting in touch with my grandmother, who I never met. Understand? And so I carry her spirit stronger today
Right.
as a result of that isolation.
I see. Do you understand yourself more?
Of course.
Okay. Well,
Not saying that, you know, I'm like, how to say, fully enlightened,
right.
you know, because I think that that's relative.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm on a path.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that Christ, just the example of Christ, the story of Christ, whether or not that story is true or not, it really does not matter. The idea of understanding ourselves is to fully understand everybody else. And I think Christ was very clear about that, you know, through what he did, what he said, what he taught, those sorts of things. Christ was not interested in reclaiming the Jewish heritage. He was not.
I think the disciples were.
The disciples were.
And recasting it.
Yeah, but Jesus was not. Jesus was more involved in the teaching, both didactically and practically, in this is how you connect with yourself, through devotion, through practice, through good deeds. Isn't it interesting, in the church they often say that good deeds won't get you into heaven. And now that heaven and hell have collapsed from the consciousness of most human beings in America and across the globe, now we're looking towards good deeds, because all along our human flesh has needed other human beings. And we can't get there because we don't know ourselves. You see? So, and BodhiChristo is about that. It's about fully understanding yourself. Some of our pursuits, while they are worthwhile and important, I deeply believe that, especially throughout the course of history, everybody's pursuing something. You know, everybody's cross-pollinating everybody else's eyes. You know, oh, look at them, look at them, look at them. You know, everybody's pursuing something. You see. And then when those entities clash, what do you have? Conflict among human beings. If understanding of the human being is first, then the pursuits would be understood. In India, at one point, there were 80,000 different religions. Everybody, you know, everybody had their own religion, and it was okay. It was like socially acceptable. All right, well, you do this. You worship the scorpion. You worship this. You know, that's fine. And they had no religious conflict. You see, they practiced as they individually felt, and everybody was good with it. Here in this country, we have discrimination, first out. We are very observant of other people's paths, and if those paths don't match up with our definitions, then we immediately castrate the human connection. And this makes for a better world, does it not?
No.
So pursuits, regardless of what they are, if they do not originate from a place where the human being who is pursuing has pursued themselves, fully understood themselves, you know, then it's a good possibility we'll be doing this. And that's no way to bring people together. If the emphasis is on us and not me, then there will never be us. Oh, is this not true? Yes. Because we're doing great with practicing us, aren't we?
No.
No. The statistics of our living, our existence here on the planet indicate these things to us. They show us this. They tell us this, you see. So, to know you, to know that you are broken, to know that you are sad, to know that you have these issues, this makes for a better human being on the pursuit.